And if so, where are you seeing art addressing the changing ethnic demographics of so many of Maryland and DC's neighborhoods?
Let's just start with DC. If you go to 14th Street, if you're familiar with 14th Street, that was a street that no one would ever drive down unless you were in armor. And if you had visitors, you would always circumvent that street because it is where the people who practice illegal pharmaceuticals and sell various body parts would frequent. But now it is the place that everybody wants to go to. And when it started, when you go back maybe 30 years, there was the Studio Theater and there was Source Theater, and that was it. And people would park their car, they'd run out and run into the theater because they didn't want to be accosted. And they really were the anchor, especially Studio Theater. And if you go further up 14th Street, where Gala Hispanic Theater is, and the Dance Institute, I'll tell you a short story. When Gala Hispanic started, Rebecca Mandrano is the managing director, and she came in with blueprints and with Horning Brothers and said, "Oh, we're going to build a theater, and we're going to have a grocery store, and we're going to have." She had no money, she had nothing, and I thought, and you see what's there now. So that's just one small example. And if you go to 7th Street, the same thing. 7th Street was very dismal, dark, empty. Shakespeare Theater was on 7th Street, but before that, the Landsberg Building, which was just a big warehouse. I go back so far, it's ridiculous. It was dark. There was nothing there. It was a dark hole. So that there was no downtown. If you brought people here, they'd go, "Oh, where's the downtown? Where do I go?" And now it's vibrant and it's exciting. But it's there because the arts organizations planted their stakes, they were bold, they stayed, and people came. So that gives you a sense of,
You were mentioning workshops to facilitate collaboration and understanding between these different groups, but you were also mentioning a lot of ego and probably a spirit of competition. I'm wondering if you can give one or two examples of how these workshops or other art events kind of served as an impetus for people wanting to work more.
Absolutely.
Examples of it inspiring people to collaborate more. Thank you.
What we found was that the not-for-profit arts is hard work. And people don't want to leave their desk. They hate to leave their desk because they're afraid that if they leave their desk, something horrible will happen to them. So when we would put together what we called affinity groups so that they could come together, we did several. And when we brought, for example, executive directors together, some things happen when you're by yourself and you're working. You think, "Oh, I'm crazy because no one else could possibly think that it's this hard, or that they have to go through what I'm going through." When they got together and began to talk to each other, they realized that, oh, this is the nature of the way of the world. And partnerships developed. They found that some organizations that didn't know each other began to work together, crossing jurisdictional boundaries. Because we're regional, we would bring people from Maryland, Virginia, and the district together, and they weren't landlocked or organizational locked before, or discipline locked before. And when we would just create a workshop, what we found was the networking component was the part they loved the most, because that was where they had an opportunity to share. They would never have met each other had we not done it. And we often don't find this out until much later, because I told you we're the skeleton, so no one comes and says, "Oh, thank you, Bones, for holding me up." But we found out later, when someone said, "Oh, I met so-and-so, and we're now doing this great thing." And I'm like, "Oh, gee, that was a year and a half ago, and it would have been nice for you to..." But no one tells us this stuff. We find out only when we see them together, and we find out that they came together through us.
So I just wanted to ask you a question. If, hypothetically, one were to recreate something like an America House today, to try to help also the way in which America is perceived abroad and also presented abroad, what would you do in such an America House? In the sense, what kinds of cultural activities would you suggest that, whether it's the State Department or even better civil society, to do to really represent a more fuller picture, maybe correcting misinformation about America or supplementing partial information? If you had a wish list and could do maybe 3 things, what would you do in such an institution abroad, whether it's Germany or Iran or China or anywhere around the world? If you could offer us maybe some advice to the international community.
Well,
When you say art and culture coming from US, they always a perception of is kind of propaganda. Without propaganda, how you can deal with this question as a diplomacy tool and not,
okay, let's see. Well, there's several parts to this question. Let's see if I can focus on this. Because I understand what you're saying. Because it isn't just as a goodwill ambassador we come. I believe that all forms of art is a universal language. And artists understand that. Artists basically, we've always had different countries come to talk to the Cultural Alliance to find out how they can duplicate the same kind of system in their countries. We've had people from all over the world to come and talk to us. And the Kennedy Center has brought artists from places that we wouldn't believe they could get them here to present, just so that people would have an understanding of that culture. I think that if we were going to create an art house or a cultural house, it would have to be a center that was really representative, sort of a United Nations kind of feel, but different artists from different places, and they're only coming together to discuss their art. They're not coming together to discuss the politics, because through art, politics will come out anyway. But once you bring in other components, then it gets in the way. I think that it's dance, visual art, music are all universal. I don't think I could separate it out. I think I'd have to have them all there, but they'd have to be equally represented. In the same way, we work with all of the disciplines. When they come together, there's great energy. That energy can't take place if you don't have some kind of umbrella to bring them under with a common goal. And that common goal would be to share, to learn from each other on an equal playing field. Because if we have the Kennedy Center and we have a tiny organization all on the same platform, Kennedy Center doesn't need to be on that platform, but they are, because they want to be connected to the whole. So, I mean, does that answer your question?
It does. I think it's an exciting potential. I think there, if we had something like a Kennedy Center, it's like I stole this one. If we had like the Kennedy Center, let's say in Europe or around the world, that would be interesting to flip it somehow, to try to allow that exchange to take place abroad. And I think one template that one could also consider, we co-organized an event called Berlin Bronx Connection, where they actually took young rappers from the Bronx and brought them together
Exactly.
with rappers from Berlin to actually do workshops together, to work together, and then eventually perform together in German and in English, and later on they actually produce an album together. Those kinds of collaborations then can also be great. Whereas you said on an equal playing field.
Always on an equal playing field.
So it'd be interesting to see something like the Cultural Alliance or Kennedy Center to try to see, could that be transplanted abroad? And I think
it can be. It can be. It can be only if all the players are, if there's an equal representation, they're all on the same playing field. I mean, and I think that's the key. And that's where the difficulty comes. Because the difficulty comes when you've got those with greater expertise than others. And it's not easy, but it can be done. I mean, it takes a while, but it can be done. It can be only if all the players are, if there's an equal representation, they're all on the same playing field. I mean, and I think that's the key. And that's where the difficulty comes. Because the difficulty comes when you've got those with greater expertise than others. And it's not easy, but it can be done. I mean, it takes a while, but it can be done.
No, true. There, I would say listening is more important than speaking. So I think there, let's say the Americans, whoever is going there, were to go first and listen and see what are the local stories, the local traditions that they have to share, and then maybe to respond to that. So we'll see. But we hope.
You know what would be interesting? I think what would be even more interesting would be to have the different groups come together and they have to do, they're being taught by each other, but they have to do what they do. In other words, I don't work from my level of expertise. I work from your level of expertise, and you have to do what I teach you. That's where the understanding comes. It's very, very difficult. It's easy when you're doing your thing, and I'm teaching you, so I can show off. But when you teach me, and I have to do what you've taught me, then there's a humbling experience, and that's when the communication and understanding really evolves.
And understanding in both directions.
Exactly.
The best way to understand yourself is to see yourself through the eyes of someone else.
Absolutely.
You see someone performing your art, so on both levels.
It's being the conscious observer and being able to separate out to be able to see. And I think that, I know it would work. We just have to create it.